Hi, it's Uda from Cafe Culture, and today I'm going to show you how to make kombucha. So we'll just have a look at the ingredients that you're going to need. You're going to need a mother mushroom or SCOBY, which stands for symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast, and some starter tea. This particular one is about 10 centimeters across, and we've got 250 mils of starter tea, or 1 cup. We also need a jar. We're going to make 3 litres with this, and a 4-litre jar is really a minimum, so you've got a little bit of space at the top for it to breathe. You will also need a cup of sugar and 6 to 8 tea bags, or 6 to 8 teaspoons of loose black tea, preferably organic, and a plastic or a wooden spoon or silicone. It's always nice to have something slotted because it allows you to mix the brew much easier and also dissolve the sugar much better. So, but it's up to you, but we prefer not to use metal for this particular instance. I generally use 1 litre of water. I add my tea bags and my sugar after the tea has steeped for about 10 minutes, and it will be quite strong, and we're then going to dilute that into the water once it's steeped. You don't want to steep it for too long because the tannin in the tea can make your kombucha bitter. Okay, so this was made previously. The ideal thing is for it to cool down within a couple of hours from when you first steeped your tea to about 20 degrees when you add your SCOBY at room temperature. So to speed up that process, you might choose to put it in the fridge for a short period of time, put a lid on it to try and keep contaminants out. Tea can be contaminated more easily than kaffir, for instance, so it's good to keep all your utensils very clean. Now, what I'll do is, we won't need these now that I've explained to you how we need to use that. I have previously measured 2 litres of water in our 4-litre jar, and all you need to do now is to simply add your cooled tea, which is at room temperature, to your jar. And I recommend that you use a spoon to add it, or you can use your hands. You just need to make sure that they're really clean. So that just needs to be popped into your jar. It may float, it may sink, it doesn't really matter. And then you add your starter tea. In this case, it's 250 ml. And you have the option of either adding simply something that will keep flies out. You can use a loose cork as long as it gets a chance to breathe, but we do recommend that using a cloth is a better idea. So before we add the cloth, what we need to do is we do need to give this a good stir to make sure that you've mixed it quite well. If you use a tight weave cotton cloth, that will do the job quite nicely. And you then store it on the bench for 1 to 2 weeks. Again, you need to put that at room temperature in a nice corner or a cupboard. It's good to have a little bit of airflow for it not to be too stagnant, but just keep checking it and taste it on a regular basis so that you can see how the profile changes. I also recommend that you taste it when it's first made so that you know how much sugar is in there originally, and it gives you an idea as it becomes more tangy and the sugar is actually consumed by the probiotics and the bacteria that will grow into your kombucha. All right, so It's as simple as that. Okay, I also wanted to show you the SCOBY a little bit more close up. You can see that sometimes as it ferments, it forms layers. That's part of the process. So what happens is once you add your SCOBY to your brew, you'll find that if this is not floating at the top or it sits at the bottom, it will start to grow another mushroom culture on top, at the top layer of your brew. And this is what you can see with these layers. Once you disturb the liquid and a new layer of the tea actually floats over the top of it, it will literally start a new SCOBY, and there'll be some separation. But this is quite solid, and you will also find that sometimes they look a little dirty, which is the actual tea and the tannins and the small particles can sometimes become part of that SCOBY, but that is perfectly healthy and there is absolutely nothing wrong with this whatsoever. All right, just to show you, and they don't always come out even, sometimes they are a little bit lopsided, and that's totally okay. So here's an example to show you how those layers are formed. You can see that there is a new layer that's forming at the top of this brew, and the other section of the SCOBY is actually slipped down. Okay, so as an alternative for simply brewing in a standard jar, which is quite acceptable, you can actually get a spigot jar for continuous brewing. What it allows you to do is to tap your brew as you need it over the 7 to 14 day period. What you'll find though is it will become more acidic as time goes on. So the recommendation is that once you're happy with the flavor profile, that you decanter all bar 10% of your container and bottle it for your second fermentation if you choose to do that, or if not, just bottle it as is. You don't have to add fruit to it. It's totally up to you. And what you do then is you basically do your fermentation and start your brew again, but you won't need to add your SCOBY and you won't need to add your starter tea because that will already be in your jar. You don't need to clean your jar between each fermentation. You should clean it every now and then because you will find that the tea and the tannin will actually settle in the bottom. And if you don't like that, it's a good idea to empty it, clean it out. Clean it out with kombucha vinegar. That would be my recommendation rather than using any other add-ons, and certainly you shouldn't be using any chemicals. Okay, so same thing applies. If you use the spigot jar, you would have that on a bench somewhere or in a cupboard. I would recommend that you do the same thing, which is to use a cloth over the top. We don't recommend that you keep the lid because it just doesn't allow enough airflow. I would highly recommend that you have a look at our written instructions, which give you some additional details also about hygiene, some time frames and proportions as a reminder. So we would recommend that you download those. So that's as simple as it is to make kombucha. Okay, so this is the second part of your process, which is actually bottling your fermented kombucha after it's been fermenting for either between 7 and 14 days, depending on how you like it. You can use bottles that you have in your house, or you can purchase bottles specifically for the purpose. I prefer using glass simply because you're dealing with an acid-based liquid. Plastics tend to interact over time with your container. So glass is always my preferred option. But we've got a couple of different styles, so if you keep a soft drink bottle, just reuse it. Make sure you clean it really, really well. We've got a cleaning cloth which allows you to do this, which you can find on our website, which does an awesome job at keeping your bottles clean. Now, depending on the size of the neck of the bottle, I would recommend that you chop your fruit at the right size for fresh fruit, and make sure that if you're using dried fruit that it's smaller than the actual opening, to make sure when it swells up it will still come out. You can use fresh fruit, you can use spices, frozen fruit, dried fruit, juice, pretty much anything as long as it doesn't have any preservatives, to make sure that you retain the goodness of the kombucha. Alright, now I've prepared one earlier, which basically I've decanted the kombucha and I've left a little bit of room at the top to make sure that I can add some juice and maybe a couple of pieces of fruit for this. And it's as simple as that. You can put your juice in first if you want to do that, to make sure that you don't end up spilling things, or that you get the right amount of juice and fruit. This is lemon juice and some grapefruit juice. You can put actual fruit pieces in if you like. And I've also got some frozen blueberries here, which taste really nice. So you don't need many. It's totally up to you. It really is just whatever you want to do. Pineapple's lovely. Again, if you add fresh fruit, you will find, it's my experience, that the kombucha actually ends up being slightly more alcoholic. And the other thing to watch is you can get gas building up. It's a good idea to either leave a bit of room at the top or do burp your bottles like you would with water kefir as well. So that can ferment a little bit longer on the bench if you like. And then it's ready to drink, or you can refrigerate it, whatever your preference. Simple as that, ready to go.